Ah, dear listeners, it has been far too long. It is my honor to speak to you once again, to tell you we are most delighted with our beloved Jeremiah's upcoming interview. Prognosticating the prestigious presence permitted through our most precious parapets is a man whose work has ushered in the acceptance of video gaming soundtracks as a true art form. His piece, Baba Yetu, played over the cultural touchstone of video games that is Civilization 4, is seen as a landmark composition in the medium, and the venerable Mr. Christopher Tin shows no signs of slowing, having very recently released his latest album, To Shiver the Sky. Mr. Tin, the skies above the Fanitarium shiver in anticipation of your arrival, of the music of not only your melodies but your musings. You grant us the privilege of your company and conversation. We hope in return you accept the warmest of welcomes to the Fanitarium.
You have been doing other very fascinating things. Like I know one project that you got to work on, which I saw your name in the credits and got really happy. And I imagine it probably meant quite a bit to you. You got to work on some of the music that was used in Crazy Rich Asians, which came out a couple of years ago now. Which my wife and I finally saw actually that recently because we have kids and we're like we'll get to it eventually, and eventually we got to it and we all enjoyed it. But
Good.
That movie I know meant a lot to a lot of people that look a bit different than I do. But it was a fun movie, and you got to contribute arranging, I believe, some jazz music for that movie that was used by John Chu.
Yeah, the very opening jazz number that you hear over the movie, the titles, the film, not the titles, what do you call it? The studio logos.
Yeah.
That is a big band reinvention of a 1930s Shanghai jazz tune called When Will You Return? And I, put together this pitch for John M. Chu, and he loved it. And they basically hired me to expand that and do a couple other jazz numbers. We wanted to evoke this world of like old money glitz, right? Yeah. I mean, and that's why this idea of hearkening back to the 30s, Shanghai with big band jazz, that really appealed to everyone. And, jazz is kind of a big thing in the entire movie. Like there's a few jazz numbers.
Yeah.
And it was, it was a blast. It was a blast to be a part of that project. It was great to work with John M. Chu. I mean, yeah, that was just a hell of a lot of fun. And I'll tell you, that was the first time I ever wrote anything for big band before. I mean, I have jazz chops. Like I played in a lot of jazz combos growing up, but I'd never actually written for big band before. So this is one of these sort of dream gigs where a film studio says, hey, we want you to write a big band number to open our movie, and we're going to give you a huge, orchestra, studio jazz band to record it with, and just have fun. I'm like, okay, well, I'm just the luckiest guy in the world right now. So it was a blast. I really loved doing it.
So looking at jazz, I've never thought about what's the difference between Shanghai or Chinese jazz and American jazz? Is there a difference?
I'm sure if you talk to someone who's a real expert, they will tell you. I mean, I think, a lot of the Chinese jazz that you heard, it was basically based around pentatonic scales, which is sort of the 5-note scale that you hear in Asian music, right? Mm-hmm. Especially Chinese music. And it was, I mean, within, 5-note melodies, there's still a lot you can do jazz-wise, is what I discovered. But I mean, and I'm talking about, interesting harmonies and reharmonizations and all the fun little jazz tricks that like big band arrangers like to employ. I think back in the 30s, jazz was different back then. Yeah. It was, the language was simpler in a way. You're coming off of, who are we talking about here? Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Ella Fitzgerald. I mean, yes, jazz chords were more harmonically more adventurous than the rest of the world, but we weren't quite in the same sound world that we were, after bebop, right?
Yeah.
Chinese jazz kind of got squashed in the 30s, or maybe the 40s. Like it didn't actually thrive beyond that. It was considered decadent, and so like other things that were considered decadent in the 40s, it was sort of squashed. I mean, the same thing happened in Germany, right?
Yeah.
Louis
So like
Armstrong
when
was,
Mao Zedong, was it Mao Zedong?
yeah.
When the Cultural Revolution and everything happened, the Hong Kong influence on their music kind of dissipated because it was Western. It wasn't a good thing. I imagine Taiwan kept it, but the rest of mainland China did not. I
Well,
imagine.
I think, I really think though that jazz in China was particularly a Shanghai phenomenon because Shanghai was sort of the entertainment capital of China, right? So I think they were turning out films back then, and the classy, cool Western thing to do was to have jazz incorporated into the films. I believe this song was originally from a film, the song that I chose to remake for
Mhm.
Crazy Rich Asians. But outside of that, once the Communist Party sort of cracked down on it and squashed it, it didn't have the roots anywhere else to really thrive. So
Makes sense.
that was sort of the end of Chinese jazz back then.
I guess the only other thing I can think of with Chinese jazz and it would be Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Oh my God, yeah, and
The
that
very
right. I mean,
beginning.
at the very beginning, and of course that is like late 30s, right? That's
Yeah.
so that's the setting right there.
Yeah. That's cool. Other projects you've worked on since last time I talked to you, you got to do an EDM beach orchestra collaboration with an Australian DJ I've actually heard of, Ty D,
Hmm.
called Collide, which I remember when it was coming out, I was like, oh, I'm going to get this. And then I had kids. And then my brain's
Yes.
like, I need to get back to this. And then my brain has kids again. And then because of having more kids. But this is one I need to get back to try to find because it sounds crazy, but at
It's
the
a
same
little
time,
crazy.
the good type of crazy, like the type of crazy that sounds, fun. Like today, my wife and I were going through like remixes of Toss a Coin to Your Witcher, which is like, oh look, there's a Eurobeat one. Oh look, there's a club mix. Oh, there's a heavy metal one. Oh look, this one's a Russian choir. They're all very different, and this sounds like the type of like collaboration I think would be really fun to do.
It was fun. I mean, well, first of all, Tidy and I are good friends now. I mean, I was literally on the phone with him yesterday.
Oh, cool.
Um, and it it was. I love doing collaborations because I just like to, life's short, right? You just don't want to be writing the same type of music all the time for the same types of ensembles. You want to mix it up, right?
Hmm?
So over the last couple of years, I've gotten to mix it up with big band for movies like Crazy Rich Asians and EDM collaborations with Tidy, and then I mean, of course, like working as I do in media school, and you're throwing all sorts of wild and crazy projects, and you have to
Like
do all sorts of
Sausage
wild and
Party.
crazy, like Sausage Party. That was a blast, and honestly, I got brought into that because Alan Menken and Chris Leonard. I know them both, and they just, they're just busy guys, and they just needed someone to kind of jump in and help out around the edges of the movie. And I mean, of course, I was happy to do it. It's a freaking hilarious movie, man. I think it's one of Seth Rogen's funniest
Yeah.
roles. I think. I mean, it's just hilarious. And yeah, that was a lot of fun. I'm glad I got to do that.
And at that time, Mankin was also working on probably my favorite show of all time. He was working on Gallivant, which needed more seasons. But
Yes, Gallivant with Chris Leonard. So that's how
yeah.
those two know each other. And then Menken and I, this is kind of crazy. We were working on a Vegas show together that ultimately got canceled because, we were writing new music for this Vegas billionaire, Steve Wynn, right? Wynn Resorts and Casinos. He just had money to throw around. He's like, okay, I'm going to hire you guys for a year and you're going to come up with basically a 90-minute Cirque du Soleil style show for us. And, we went to London, we recorded it with the Royal Phil, and I spent a week conducting them. It was just amazing. We come back with a fully realized, fully re-choreographed show. And then Steve Wynn comes in and says, you know what? I don't like it. Let's just throw it away. And that was it. That was mind
Oh,
boggling to me that somebody could spend north of $10 million just on the music. And we're not even talking about like rebuilding a set, hiring actors and singers and acrobats and stuff like that. He threw so much money at this thing, and then just kind of on a whim, he said, "You know what? Nah, let's not do this." Just mind completely blown, and it's
can
a
you imagine
shame.
having that much money just to be able to? That's
I,
okay. 10
yeah,
million.
that's okay.
That's
I'm
fine.
good. Yeah, whatever. That was just for the music. I swear to God, that was just for the music. Holy moly! I mean, it was just mind blowing that we could spend an entire year doing something like that, get paid handsomely for it, and then just say, nah, you know what? Nah, we're good. Let's not do this. Let's do something else instead. Holy shit! That just blew my mind right there.
One thing that just came to mind is I remember now that you worked on a little bit on the Dante's Inferno game that came out and wanted to be God of War about 10 years ago.
Yeah. No, no, not the
And
game. Not. No, no,
well,
no.
no, the anime.
Yeah. Yes, the anime. I
And
worked on
the
the
music will
anime.
take you on that. The anime that tied in. Yeah, I think it was a tie-in or something great. But like
Yeah.
the music in that one is so different than your take on Dante's Inferno lines in this album.
Yeah.
It's
Completely
kind of like
different.
weird whiplash. But I guess you're also working with other people. You had to have a kind of a cohesive sound, and that anime would not really fit very well with something light and inspiring because it's it's very dark.
It's very dark. I mean, that. Okay, so first of all, that game. I mean, I just remember there was a lot of controversy around that game. So the score for that game was done by actually my good friend Gary Scheinman. I don't know if he's ever been on your show, but
It hasn't been on my show, but I know who he is. Yes, and
yeah. Oh, he's great. You probably know BioShock. That's probably
yes,
his biggest franchise, right? But his music for Dante's Inferno, it's very dissonant and modern. It's really cool. And so, I got the gig doing the anime based on the game because the director of the anime was a longtime friend and client of mine. But of course, EA was very much involved in the anime as well. And they said, you know what, we sort of want you to keep it sounding like the game franchise, right? So I was basically writing music that sounded kind of like Gary's music, And Gary, I mean, that's a great job too because Gary's music is so good. He's a very, very, very good composer and a good friend. He's probably, one of my two closest game composer friends here in the business here in LA.
and what's kind of interesting is you also got to work on a Dead Space movie anime, um, and I've had Jason Graves on the show, and his music is for Dead Space is extremely layered, like the type of one where you have a layer in it that you don't know is there, but you feel it when you listen.
Mm.
And you had your one. Did they tell you to have to do a take on his style too? Because his style I don't usually see repeated anywhere because he has insane amounts of layers in his music that I don't usually hear people putting in there.
Yeah, in that case, the direction was not so explicit. Again, it was the same director, a director I've worked with for a number of years called Mike Disa. And he's a great animation director. He just launched a podcast called Sentinels, by the way, that I have to give a shout out to because I co-wrote the theme song for it. But that's how I got brought on these animes that basically evolved from game properties. I haven't played either Dante's Inferno or Dead Space. I don't actually know how the music of Dead Space actually sounds. I know that Jason is a very respected and skilled composer, and he has a very unique way of scoring and recording things. I think he's based out like South Carolina or something like that. I've never met him.
Yeah.
But there wasn't any instruction. Like they didn't send me any of his music and say, make it sound like this. They just, gave me the film and I just scored it like anybody who's coming to a property fresh, I suppose.
That's a good way to do it because the way I've had him on. One of the cool things I did is he told me, like, I was listening to a song, I'm like, I don't know why, but this song like gives me the creeps, and he's like, that's because I put this layer underneath these 5 other layers and you don't actually hear it, but your body knows it's there, your ear knows it's there. That's a lot of work for something you won't hear.
Yeah.
But he does it because it makes you scared in ways that you don't know because you can't hear it, but you know it's there. And it's just a fascinating way to do music, but it's also something that's very much him. But another cool thing. Oh, go on.
I think all of us composers like to squeeze in little Easter eggs when we can. I mean, I seem to remember the Doom score. Was it Doom, or was it something else? Like if you bring it up on a sonogram, I think it says Doom. Like you look at the frequencies, plotted out. There was some clever mastering work done to one of the tracks, and there's a secret message encoded in the
Mick Gordon score.
Is that who it? Maybe
yeah. The heavy rock, the hard rock stuff that he like brings in like metal musicians and singers to just rock out with him.
I think that's probably what I wanted to say. Frank Klipotsky. Frank, I can't pronounce his last name. But I think you're right, Nick Gordon. Yes, I think I remember seeing a little viral thing about that. Like if you use a little Easter egg, you pull it up on a sonogram, here's, some weird satanic symbols and stuff like that. Clever, fun. I love
He
that
also does
stuff.
Wolfenstein. I wouldn't be surprised if he hides something in there too.
Or maybe it was Wolfenstein that I'm thinking of, but yeah,
I'd believe either because they're both great and they're both very much him.
mhm. We love doing that.
There's few scores that I can hear where they put out in a
Stuff.
mosh pit will start at like E3. Where they like, let's play the Doom score, and a mosh pit starts on the main floor. Like, really? This is press. Why are they moshing?
That's great.
But another cool thing you got to do is you got to work on the opening startup jingle for the Microsoft Surface. How in the world do you even come up with a sound like that? That instantly, know it's going to be used for years and years. It is very heavily trademarked by Microsoft. How in the world do you come up with that sound? Like, I imagine whoever came up with the Nokia jingle is rich, hopefully. But how do you do that?
It's all a buyout. Okay, so the thing about that is actually, I worked on the original Microsoft Surface before it became a tablet. So
Okay.
back in the day, we're talking, 2007, 2008 or something, Microsoft had a tabletop touchscreen computer called the Surface, and it was pretty cool. I mean, it was basically like a coffee table that you could do stuff on. I mean, it cost a huge amount of money, and no one was ever going to own it. But it was basically, for corporate events, business installations, things like that. Sorry,
sci-fi movies.
Sure, exactly. I mean, that's the idea, right? It's very Minority Report, right?
Yeah.
So me and a sound designer, we were tasked with coming up with, an audio language for not just the boot up sound, but, like anytime you touch something, you need some sort of audio feedback because you don't have tactile feedback on a piece of glass. So this was just a challenge that we were given. We were both working at a company called Sound Deluxe DMG at the time. I was just starting to work there, and on a freelance sort of basis, and I got paired up with him. And we just honestly, it's just a lot of trying out different things, running it by the audio lead at Microsoft, and the audio lead runs it by a committee because Microsoft is very committee oriented. And then it's just kind of like whatever people think works, So that's kind of how you create that.
Cool. Yeah, because I imagine, because having mixed sounds myself, a lot of the stuff that I come up that I like is usually a happy accident, and then you're like, how did I do that? I don't want to try to fix it. It's there, it's good, and so on. And one last thing we could talk about that as far as game wise, my wife and my nephew was playing a game called Rise of Kingdoms. They informed me that your name is on this game.
Yeah.
An
That
app.
was Yeah, totally. Just another offshoot of my name being associated with civilization, right? Like, I think I get, a lot of times when I get calls for games, it tends to be games that have sort of a civilization vibe to them. You found a kingdom or a civilization, an empire, and then you grow it, and maybe you meet rival empires that have a different sort of musical sound to them. I mean, that was a fun one. I like to do that sort of stuff. So, and there's more coming. I gotta say, it's
Cool.
There's other stuff that you and I might talk about in a year or two. So that's all I can say.
When you do a mobile game, do you have to compress it significantly more than you do for? I know because the video games compress it a little more than you would for just a normal album, but for mobile game, do you have to compress it even more?
I just give them the full bandwidth files. I let their audio team compress it, however they need to. I mean, I think, yeah, definitely like, file size becomes a real issue, right? But I generally am not asked to answer those questions. I think there are definitely game composers out there who know how to implement audio and are very savvy with audio engines in different languages, Fmod and Wise and whatever else. I'm just kind of a pure traditional composer. Like I rely on their in-house audio guys to walk me through a lot of that stuff. So if I have to do like, really uh, technical or very, what's the word? Like generative scores or things like that. I mean, like I leave it to the audio lead to tell me what to do. I just kind of put the notes to paper, so to speak.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And, putting notes to paper is kind of how you started, because didn't you originally start by transcribing scores from Williams and Horner and Barry and
Yeah, that was
lots
my
of
first
people?
gig. That was my first job, actually. I was still in college, at the Royal College of Music, actually, and I got hired by a record label to basically sit down and transcribe film scores, which is a great gig. I mean, I went into the scoring business because I wanted to write for orchestra. That is specifically a love of mine. I like writing for voices too. I'm kind of a classical guy in that way, right?
Hmm.
So that's why a lot of my scores tend to be like that. That's just what I've always enjoyed writing for. And I love being in front of an orchestra. I love leading them in concerts. I love working with players. That's just who I am. I would be a very, very poor choice for a game like Doom or Wolfenstein, right? That's just not me. There are a lot of things that I think you do not want to hire me for. But that, sort of the John Williams, James Horner, Ennio Morricone world that I sort of grew up in, that late romantic, rich classical sound, that's kind of my bread and butter. So I think you're more likely to find me on things like that than, more. You're never going to hear me on a Call of Duty or something like that.
Well, I won't say never, because I've heard some amazing scores from Call of Duty, like was it Roger the
Will
Will Roger
Roger.
the third. He did one recently for World War II, and it's like that was absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
And it was very
yeah,
different than some of the other ones I've heard, like the Hans Zimmer. I don't think Hans Zimmer actually did most of the score. I think he did one song, but the Hans Zimmer sounds we had earlier were very different than what he did, and I can definitely see your sound coming to something like that, but it would have to be a very specific one with a very specific story they're telling for it to work.
yeah. Maybe, I mean, if there were, for example, a World War One Call of Duty or something like that, maybe they'd bring me in, and then I can incorporate influences from the music of the era, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's a bit of a historicism element to a lot of what I do, and maybe I would be the right fit for something like that. But yeah, I don't see myself scoring Modern Warfare or
Yeah.
anything.
I'm just surprised that they didn't do Call of Duty World War One, since Battlefield One with who did that score? Is Johann Sode or something? I don't.
Mm.
He has a like a Polish name. I don't, or Swedish name that I think I'd butcher if I really tried it. But I could see, yeah, I could definitely see something like that really working, and we'll see what happens in the future. But right now, let's go back to your first album, to your, not your first album, but to Shiver the Sky. Where can people buy it?
Oh, it's everywhere. I mean, iTunes, Amazon, Apple Music, Spotify, Tidal, Deezer. It's everywhere. I mean,
Does it have a
so this,
physical release at all?
yeah, physical. It does. It does. If you just go to ChristopherTin.com, there's a web store specifically for To Shiver the Sky. As I don't know if we mentioned this already, but this is my first album on Universal. Earlier this year, I signed a big record deal with their label Decca, which is kind of a legendary classical label. And so now I'm a Decca artist, and this will be the first of many releases through Universal. And there's a sort of a gradual migration of handing off, like me shipping out CDs and sheet music from my studio in Santa Monica to UMG handling the distribution, through their big channels. So it's it's available everywhere. If you go to my site, you'll be able to get vinyl as well, CDs. Sheet music is being published by Boozy and Hawks very soon. Select movements are being published by Hal Leonard very soon, for choir and smaller ensembles. This is one of the latest evolutions in my career, I guess, like signing with a publisher like Boozy and Hawks, signing with Universal, signing with Concord. I've just sort of entered a lot of sort of business partnerships with a lot of big entities in the last couple of years,
Mhm.
and it's kind of exciting, I gotta say.
I see on Amazon that it says the vinyl will be released on the 18th of September. Is that just Amazon releases it and you already have it on your site, or that's when it's going to be probably shipping out?
Oh, well, I didn't even know that. I knew it was delayed because of COVID. Like the vinyl pressing plant is having like they basically just they got hit hard
Yeah.
by COVID and just was not they're not able to meet demand. You know, they're only able to have a few people at a time working on things. Um, and I
I
know
imagine
that they
supply
experienced
chain's
delay.
pretty hit. I imagine the supply chain of theirs is hit pretty bad too.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, that's just the world we're in right now.
Yeah. But this is exciting, and so yeah, I definitely recommend people go get it. As you heard on this episode, there are some clips from it where that's the taste. There's a lot more music on there, and of course, all your other music I believe is also on your website and on Amazon. I believe
Yeah,
I know for sure
yes.
it's on Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon, iTunes, Spotify, everywhere. It's out there.
And I recommend getting the CD if possible because as much as MP3s are nice, they're not the same.
They're not the same. I mean, God, like some of my older albums. Boy, you know what I love doing? I love listening to the full resolution 96K 24-bit recordings. Oh my God, especially orchestral music. Sounds so good. Put up a great pair of headphones. Man, and that's available too. I think it's on for Shiver the Sky. That's on Qboz, Quboz. They stream high definition content too. I mean, God, if you really want to listen to, you know, gorgeous orchestral music, like find a high resolution copy and listen to that. It's just stunning.
Yeah. I was listening to the drop that contained the C, and originally I was streaming it on Amazon, but I'm like, no, I need the actual. I will put it in my CD. I won't be lazy. And the CD is so much better than streaming it because streaming's useful. It's good if you're on a walk, you're out. You don't have to worry about the CD bouncing around in those Discmen that never actually prevented it from skipping. But if you can sit there and listen to it on on an actual good system, the CD is just so. It makes it so much come alive. Like songs like
Yeah.
Isa
He's in Gomso,
So it's
yeah.
so powerful that way, and I definitely recommend people go get them. They're available, and a lot of great stuff there, guys. And I imagine your website's where people can go for more information on what you're doing next when you can tell us.
Yeah, absolutely. And all my, accounts, right? Like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, I'm at Christopher Tin on Twitter and at Christopher Tin Music on Facebook and Instagram. And yeah, like I'm very active there as well.
And after the last couple of years where I got regular updates from you and your management, where they just tell us what's going on, we got to read these stories about the music and the scores, and seeing some of the sheet music and hearing samples. It's gonna be kind of weird now that it's out, and
it's a little odd, right?
those
But you know what?
updates are gonna slow down.
But they're not. That's the thing. There's
Ooh.
still stuff coming out. Like there is a video coming out in about a week and a half for Movement 5 of To Shiver the Sky, which is the astronomy movement, right? And one of the Easter eggs that you won't be able to hear on the recording, but if you looked at the sheet music, you'd see, is that if you connect the dots between the note heads in the middle portion of that piece, you'll actually draw out the constellations on the sheet music as if, the notes were the stars, right? And it's all the constellations that have to do with flight. So, the dragon, the eagle, the phoenix, flying fish, Pegasus, the swan, all of these constellations, they're actually encoded in the sheet music. And so a video will be coming out on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Christopher Tin. And, in about a week and a half, you'll be able to see, like, here's this crazy little Easter egg that I threw into my music.
That's so cool. Love it. Love it. Can't wait to see that. But we've taken a good amount of your time. Thank you so much for giving us so much of your time, and we're looking forward to what you do next. Especially Bird sounds really cool, but if you end up doing something else, we know it's going to be great because it's the type of music you do. We love it.
I really appreciate that. I mean, who knows what's around the corner, right? And who knows when we'll be able to record again, even. So hopefully the world will be in a better place soon.
But until then, I wish you the best and stay healthy, and hope we can get through this insanity in one piece.
I appreciate that. Good chatting with you, Jeremiah. Look
Likewise.
forward to doing it again next year.